This video is for educational purposes. Tampa is a city on the Gulf Coast of the U.S. state of Florida. The city's borders include the north shore of Tampa Bay and the east shore of Old Tampa Bay. Tampa is the largest city in the Tampa Bay area and the seat of Hillsborough County. With an estimated population of 398,173 in 2022, Tampa is the 49th most populous city in the country and the third most populous city in Florida after Jacksonville and Miami. Tampa was founded as a military center during the 19th century with the establishment of Fort Brooke. The cigar industry was also brought to the city by Vicente Martinez Ybor, after whom Ybor City is named. Tampa was reincorporated as a city in 1887 following the Civil War. Tampa's economy is driven by tourism, healthcare, finance, insurance, technology, construction, and the maritime industry. The Bay's port is the largest in the state, responsible for over $15 billion in economic impact. Subscribe to this channel and click the notification bell so you get notified each time we upload a new video. The city is part of the Tampa-St. Petersburg-Clearwater, Florida Metropolitan Statistical Area, which is a four-county area composed of roughly 3.1 million residents, making it the second-largest metropolitan statistical area, MSA, in the state and the sixth-largest in the southeastern United States, behind Dallas-Fort Worth, Houston, Washington, D.C., Atlanta, and Miami. The Greater Tampa Bay area has over 4 million residents and generally includes the Tampa and Sarasota metro areas. When the pioneer community living near the U.S. Army outpost of Fort Brooke was incorporated in 1849, it was called Tampa Town, and the name was shortened to simply Tampa in 1855. The earliest instance of the name Tampa, in the form Tampa, appears in the memoirs of Hernando de Escalante Fontaneda, who spent 17 years as a captive of the Calusa and traveled through much of peninsular Florida. He described Tampa as an important Calusa town to the north of the Calusa domain, possibly under another chief. Archaeologist Gerald Milenick places the town of Tampa at the mouth of Charlotte Harbor. The entrances to Tampa Bay and Charlotte Harbor are obscured by barrier islands, and their locations, and the names applied to them, were a source of confusion to explorers, surveyors and mapmakers from the 16th century through the 18th century. Bahia Tampa and Bahia de Espiritu Santo were each used, at one time or another, for the modern Tampa Bay and Charlotte Harbor. Tampa Bay was labeled Bahia de Espiritu Santo, Bay of the Holy Spirit, in the earliest Spanish maps of Florida, but became known as Tampa, Bahia Tampa or Tampa Bay, as early as 1576. Tampa, corresponding to Tampa Bay, appeared for the first time on a printed map in Antonio de Herrera y Tordesillas' Description del Distrito del Audiencia de la Española, from his book Description de las Indias Occidentales, printed in Madrid in 1601. A British map of 1705 also shows Tampa, with Carlos Bay for Charlotte Harbor to the south, while a 1748 British map had del Espiritu Santo for Tampa Bay and, again, Carlos Bay to the south. A Spanish map of 1757 renamed Tampa Bay as San Fernando. As late as 1774, Bernard Romans called Tampa Bay Bay of Espiritu Santo, with Tampa Bay restricted to the northwest arm, what is now Old Tampa Bay, and the northeast arm named Hillsborough Bay. The name may have come from the Calusa language or possibly the Timucua language. Some scholars have compared Tampa to Itimpi, which means close to or nearby in the Creek language, but its meaning is not known. People from Tampa are generally known as Tampans, Tampanians, or Tampinos. Local authorities consulted by Michael Cruz of the Tampa Bay Times suggest that Tampan was historically more common, while Tampanian became popular when the former term came to be seen as a potential insult. A mix of Cuban, Italian, and Spanish immigrants began arriving in the late 1800s to found and work in the new communities of Ybor City and West Tampa. By about 1900, these newcomers came to be known as Tampinos, or Tampinas for females, a term that is still sometimes used to refer to their descendants living in the area, and potentially, to all residents of Tampa regardless of their ethnic background. The shores of Tampa Bay have been inhabited for thousands of years. A variant of the Weeden Island culture developed in the area by about 2,000 years ago, with archaeological evidence suggesting that these residents relied on the sea for most of their resources, as a vast majority of inhabited sites have been found on or near the shoreline and there is little evidence of farming. At the time of European contact in the early 16th century, several chiefdoms of the Safety Harbor culture dominated the area. Early Spanish explorers interacted most extensively with the Tocabega, whose principal town was at the northern end of Old Tampa Bay near today's Safety Harbor in Pinellas County. While there is a substantial historical record of the Tokabega and the Calusa, who lived to the south, there is less surviving documentation describing the Pohoe, who lived near the mouth of the Hillsborough River near today's downtown Tampa. However, evidence suggests that the language and culture of the Pohoe and other lesser-known groups around the bay were very similar to that of the Tokabega. Expeditions led by Pamphilo de Narvaez and Hernando de Soto landed near Tampa, but neither conquistador stayed long. There is no natural gold or silver in Florida, and the native inhabitants repulsed Spanish attempts to establish a permanent settlement or convert them to Catholicism. The fighting resulted in a few deaths, but the many more deaths were caused by infectious diseases brought from Europe, which devastated the population of Native Americans across Florida and the entire Western Hemisphere. The indigenous cultures of the Tampa Bay area had collapsed by around 1600, leaving the west coast of Spanish Florida largely depopulated and ignored for more than 200 years. In the mid-18th century, events in the American colonies and the early United States drove the Seminole people into northern Florida, but they did not move into central Florida until after the United States gained control of Florida in 1821. Before the American period, the Tampa Bay area had a handful of residents, Cuban and Native American fishermen who established small seasonal camps called ranchos on the shores of Tampa Bay. The largest was at the mouth of Spanishtown Creek in today's Hyde Park neighborhood along Bayshore Boulevard. After purchasing Florida from Spain in 1821, the United States built forts and trading posts in the new territory. Fort Brooke was established in January 1824 at the mouth of the Hillsborough River on Tampa Bay, in downtown Tampa. Tampa was initially an isolated frontier outpost. The sparse civilian population practically abandoned the area during the Second Seminole War from 1835 to 1842, after which the Seminoles were forced out and many settlers returned. Florida became the 27th state on March 3, 1845. On January 18, 1849, Tampa was officially incorporated as the Village of Tampa. It was home to 185 civilians, or 974 total residents including military personnel, in 1850. Tampa was reincorporated as a town on December 15, 1855. During the Civil War, Florida seceded along with most of the southern states to form the Confederate States of America, and Fort Brooke was defended by Confederate troops. Martial law was declared in Tampa in January 1862, and Tampa's city government ceased to operate for the duration of the war. In 1861, the Union Navy set up a blockade around many southern ports to cut off the Confederacy. Several U.S. Navy ships were stationed near the mouth of Tampa Bay, but small blockade-running ships were often able to slip by the blockade to deliver cattle to Spanish Cuba, earning gold for the Confederate cause. On June 30, 1862, the gunboat USS Sagamore sailed into Tampa Bay and opened fire on Fort Brooke, which returned fire. The Sagamore withdrew after a few hours, and the Battle of Tampa caused little damage. During the Battle of Fort Brooke on October 16 and the Battle of Ballast Point on October 18, 1863, Union forces inflicted serious damage to the city's economy when, under the cover of another bombardment of the fort, troops landed and destroyed two blockade-running ships that had been hidden upstream along the Hillsborough River. In May 1864, Union troops landed again and took Fort Brooke largely unopposed. They destroyed much of the fort's facilities and confiscated the remaining military supplies other than the cannons, which they tossed into the Hillsborough River, then left the desolate town after 2 days. The Civil War ended in April 1865 with a Confederate defeat. In May 1865, federal troops arrived in Tampa to occupy the fort and the town as part of Reconstruction. They remained until August 1869. During the immediate post-war period, Tampa was a poor, isolated fishing village with about 1,000 residents and little industry. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and click the notification bell so you get notified each time we upload a new video. See you in the next one.